Thank you, Johannes, for running this session on with interesting dynamics that show the importance of research infrastructures for tackling what is currently the most relevant or at least urgent societal challenge. And now I would like to welcome Johannes, the head of unit in charge of research and industrial infrastructures in DG Research and Innovation of European Commission. Johannes, please take the floor to moderate the session, highlighting recently published Esfri white paper.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the introduction. I would like to say maybe a couple of words in relation to the some organizational aspects. There is a question that will pop up at the left side of your screen, which is the major question of that session. This session is about the white paper, the Esfri white paper, which has been at the end of April published. The Esfri chair, Hrusak, he will, as an introduction to this session, will present that white paper. And that white paper, as he will explain, is basically the big start to the definition of a new era or of a new roadmap, of a new strategy for the development of infrastructures. After this, we will have short 5 minutes presentations by four excellent researchers and innovators. We have Giorgio Rossi, we have Sandrine Dixson-Declève, we have David Bohmert, and we have John Mosley. And after that, there will be normally, hopefully, some time for getting to questions that come through the Slido. I am head of unit of the Research Infrastructures unit in the DG Research and Innovation. Have been taking up that post only very recently, and I'm really looking forward to all these interactions with you. Although, like I think everyone would have very much liked to have that done actually in real life rather than in virtual life. But that is how it is. And with that, I would like to invite maybe Jan to give his presentation as an introduction to this session. Thank you, Jan.
Okay, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, welcome also from my side, and thank you that you stayed tuned. My name is Jan Hrusak, and I am here in the position of the Esfri chair. In the next few minutes, as it has been announced, I shall share with you the result of 2 years discussion and present to you the conclusions and thoughts Esfri has developed on infrastructures and other big scientific installations, their contribution to science, innovation, growth, competitiveness, and social welfare. I'm trying to switch to a full screen now, therefore the discussion is a little bit tedious, but now I succeeded. So as you all know, Esfri is an informal governmental forum founded almost 20 years ago by the Council of European Ministers with a clear mandate to provide coherent strategy-led advice on research infrastructure policies and related matters. From that time on, we are implementing several approaches to monitor the development of European research infrastructure landscapes, and we have worked out a series of several roadmaps which evolved to a very powerful policy instrument and serve as a kind of reference point when it comes to coordination of member states and associated countries' investments into large or important scientific installations across Europe. But Europe, as said, and we have heard that already several times today, is not just about roadmaps. Esfri brings together a very unique expertise and acts in some sense as a European knowledge hub on the research infrastructures and research infrastructure policies. And this collective expertise forms a knowledge base which is often utilized by the Council of Ministers, by the ministers of the member states, by many others. And Esfri implements its missions through a competitive set of activities fostering the development, operational capacity and sustainability of the entire research infrastructure ecosystem as a strategic asset. So Esfri is providing advice on specific topics upon request of the ministers usually, or based on its own decisions and fulfilling its vision, namely, and this shall be already on the next slide, thank you, equipping Europe with the best research infrastructures possible for groundbreaking research. And one of such cases we are discussing now. I'm a bit confused with all the computers. So we are going to present to you today the result of almost 2 years discussion, a white paper which we feel is now very appropriate. We call the paper Making Sense Happen, a new ambition for research infrastructures in the European research area. And it really resembles many discussions in Esfri and with the broader audience. Several of you do remember the La Palma workshop where we had extensive discussions on the issues. So it's also the response of Esfri to new challenges lying ahead of Europe. We see this white paper as our contribution to the ongoing discussion on the renewing European research area, and we have heard many thoughts about that. But we feel to be obliged to speak on behalf of all the research infrastructures and to demonstrate how they contribute to the main era priorities. We advocate in this white paper the need for a strong position of research infrastructures, as they indeed form a backbone of the European excellence in research and are an essential ingredient of protecting a sustainable European lifestyle and values. We argue with the outreach of research infrastructures which they have to European and national sectoral agendas. I think, and it's my firm belief, that the research infrastructures shall be deeply embedded in a broad spectrum of European and national policies, and this would just multiply their effect. And in general, we see the white paper as an entry to a broader policy discussion, not only on the ERA communication as it was announced, and that shall happen under the German presidency, but in general on a discussion about Europe's future. Therefore, we thought that we may target a bit broader audience than usual, and the white paper addresses not only the European Commission and the policy makers and funders in the member states and associated countries, but also the diverse research infrastructures, the individual researchers, the general public, and the society of at large. So the structure of the white paper is a very simple one. We follow the logics that we go from general to more detailed views. Upfront, we present the 6 main messages on which we then further elaborate along the 3 independent but interconnected lines. So first, we focus on the European dimension of research infrastructures, and we elaborate on their strategic orientation within the renewed ERA. ERA stands for European Research Area. Hereby, we extend on the new ERA narrative as it has been developed by the European Research Area and Innovation Committee, ERAC. We show that research infrastructures are an important building block to ERA, contributing to all 4 identified priorities, as we have heard it from Anna earlier. We recognize the importance of sustainable development of an integrated approach to research infrastructures, their pivotal role in advancing European excellence in science, and their contribution to competitive development of European economy. In the second block, we convey and support by numerous arguments the need of implementing a healthy research infrastructure ecosystem in Europe. And this ecosystem is understood as an integrated and interconnected environment where fundamentally all the capacities of researchers to perform scientific research and at the same time maximizing the impact of this research is held. The precondition for such a functioning ecosystem is an adequate legal and financial framework that must be embedded in a supportive, policy-driven environment. And we have had already discussions on that, all the long-term sustainability issues and elements which have been identified by Esfri earlier on must also be secured. In the third block, so it is oriented inwards and is tackling mainly with Esfri internal issues. This block is equally important. It is based on the long-standing experience we developed on the capacity of Esfri to continue to provide merit-based strategic advice also in the years to come. An important issue is discussed there. It's the role of monitoring in the rapidly evolving landscape of research infrastructures. It's increasing strategic value for policy discussions and for future development of this landscape. And you're cordially invited to read that. In this slide, I somehow summarized the 6 main messages, and as said, all of you are invited to read the full paper and eventually even comment to it, because we see this paper as really an entry to a ongoing discussion, and we would like to collect even feedbacks on that. For the time being, I am not able to discuss all the messages in detail, but let me just highlight, and it's somehow a kind of personal selection, some ideas I have when looking to these main messages. So research infrastructures are really an essential pillar of ERA. They really form the backbone of an ecosystem striving for scientific excellence and providing first-class services to European and third country researchers, representing natural meeting place for academia, industry, society, this triple helix and so on. And it's really a place where knowledge is generated, exchanged, and eventually even utilized. They are contributing to education and skills development and having an indispensable role in contributing to science-based solutions of big societal programs. Research infrastructures are decisive to deliver scientific breakthrough and to foster innovation. Having said that, I come to the second message, which is pretty much related. Research infrastructures are, of course, investments into research, but I would like to see them, and maybe even more importantly, as a strategic asset, as investment into suitable and sustainable development and economic growth, because they are really contributing largely to societal well-being. Only by having an extended network of cross-disciplinary, interconnected research infrastructures, we will have the instruments to address all the pressing and complex societal challenges of today and of tomorrow. Another dimension to look to research infrastructures is their role of knowledge and innovation hubs. Research infrastructures are typically installations supporting academic blue sky research. And it has been emphasized today already several times. They are strongly rooted in the region, and they're contributing to the regional development. They have strong links to the local communities, not only to scientific communities, but also to the broader environment. And therefore, they have a very distinct regional impact. So they have usually also a global outreach. An important element is also the coherence between European, national, and even regional priorities and policies. This is a dimension which is really maximizing the impact of research infrastructures. And this coherent view shall be further developed. Research infrastructures are, and this goes not as a big surprise, major promoters of open science. I mean, historically, research infrastructures have been always providing a part of their services in an open access mode, and they continue doing so. They facilitate cross-disciplinary research by exploiting data interoperability to produce new science and tackle new societal challenges. In terms of data management, data interoperability, data sharing, research infrastructures have developed really and implemented also approaches which has to be seriously studied, considered when speaking about EOSC implementation, and we have had some comments on that earlier on as well. Last but not least, Europe has now, with Esfri, a very effective and proven mechanism to identify the potential of new investment priorities. Esfri aims further to improve its modus operandi and to optimize the organization of the research infrastructure landscape to be better capable and equipped to address the overall objectives of the new era. I invite you all to visit the Esfri webpage and download one or the other policy document, including this white paper, and to learn more about the role research infrastructures play in our daily lives and for future of Europe. I cannot avoid to show you my last slide, because let me say that we've been working on this white paper for a certain time, and I didn't expect to have a confirmation of our thoughts in such a straight way and so soon. With the COVID outbreak, we have really received a convincing confirmation of the value research infrastructure play in our daily life, and I've been impressed by the ability and by the speed research infrastructures were able to react and reorient their academic and research agendas to stay in the forefront of the COVID-19 research. Irrespectively of their mainly academic background, they deliver place-based solutions and very practical solutions. The lessons to be learned from that. In view of all the victims and consequences of the COVID crisis, we need to integrate research infrastructures more, and even we need to integrate more research into our critical infrastructures, into our strategic considerations. It is my firm belief that only if we build an integrated and an interoperable research infrastructure ecosystem that is well functioning, we will enhance our ability to react on future crises, but not only on crisis. We will accelerate also the post-crisis recovery, and we will broaden the basis for sustainable competitiveness and social welfare. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jan. Excellent presentation. Jan, what I didn't say is, you explained it yourself. You are the chair of Esfri, the European Strategy Forum for Research Infrastructures, and you are calling for the white paper to be a starting point for a broader debate. And I think the session we have today is a brilliant starting point for that. And you will see the different members on the panel can react to different aspects, notably on how to increase the broader impact of the European research infrastructures. And I would invite Giorgio Rossi to take the floor now, or rather the computer. Giorgio Rossi is a physicist. He is an Italian delegate to Esfri. He is also an Italian delegate to ERIC. He has worked on the Italian roadmap of research infrastructures, and most recently he has worked as chair of a high-level expert group of the European Commission on exactly this, on the impact of research infrastructures. Giorgio, the computer is yours.
Thank you very much. Thanks for organizing this session and for the nice introduction by you and by Ian. So the title I was assigned is How to Better Exploit the Data Management and Data Expertise of Research Infrastructure for the Development of the EOSC. This is a main message number 5 of the white paper. And I would like to address this point just by mentioning some of the conclusions that the high-level expert group that was set up by the Commission to address the long-term sustainability of research infrastructure has made on this very topic. The research infrastructures are at the crossroads of data producing facilities that need to constantly upgrade their instrumentation to stay at the forefront of research. And that includes the e-infrastructure part that goes with the producing of new science, and the EOSC-like services that will also be made accessible under the umbrella services of the EOSC. As the EOSC services may generate the traffic of data science work that is probably exceeding in a few years the capacity needs of each research infrastructure for its own science program, its own science community, we may face criticalities, and these may show up both on the side of the research infrastructure and the EOSC, and they should be addressed in time. Many research infrastructure, the Aeroforum members, the Esfri, the ERICs, and many national research infrastructure with international scope are in fact in a leading position as building blocks for the development of the EOSC, and they do participate in clusters, and they do develop cross-disciplinary interfaces. Elixir, that was mentioned and presented before, EPOS in the solid earth domain, the ESRF in the analytical science, CESAER in the social sciences, and cultural innovation, others, including also some of the successful integration actions do provide state-of-the-art references for the most advanced data management solution that are at work to fulfill the FAIR principle and to feed quality-controlled data sets into the EOSC. The implementation process of FAIR data and the related services and the goal of interoperability of the data across domains are definitely a stimulus towards the full integration of the research infrastructure into an overall interoperable research system that will offer data and coordinated access to the production of new data sets in response to both the disciplinary research needs as well as multi or interdisciplinary demands, complex problems that arise as great challenges, societal challenges, and of course, the current pandemics is an example. So the research infrastructures today are often at the forefront of all the data technology, but not so much on the interoperability aspect, because this is beyond the mission of the original mission, at least of the existing infrastructure, and therefore an effort in the elaboration of high quality metadata and in developing interoperability data services is urgent. So this again has both a structural and financial implication that must be addressed by the research infrastructure in a concerted and well-supported manner with the EOSC and the general effort in this direction. The sustainability of EOSC and of the research infrastructures are interlinked. This has been addressed also in previous session. Very likely, the real way to an effective EOSC implies that all new data sets must be fair from the very acquisition stage, from the research stage, what we call fair by design, because retrofitting fairness to existing data sets is a very expensive and heavy task. And it should be performed definitely for essential time series or observational data that cannot be acquired again. But we have to understand that in a few years, the amount of data that is available today will be only a small fraction of the total amount of data that is.
Giorgio, you have already largely reached the 5 minutes. Could I please ask you to conclude?
Okay, thanks. Sorry for that. I didn't realize. Fair by design is an important point, and that is a goal. The last point to mention is that an example, as it has been said, is that in face of the emergency of the COVID, an effort has been organized at the European level by the EMBL ABI and at a national level. I just want to show here one interesting point. This is a survey that has been carried out in Italy in the last few weeks. And as you see, the demand and the offer access opportunities to do research relevant for SARS COVID-19 is shown as like epidemiology and monitoring, and you see that there is availability of infrastructures that belong to the environmental domain, to the physical and science engineering domain, to the health and food, to the e-infrastructure, to the social and cultural innovation. And you see that in all the other points where urgent research is needed, infrastructures that thematically belong to different domains do make available their expertise and their capability of carrying out research in a very prompt and effective way. And I conclude leaving for a few seconds this slide that has bullet points for our further discussion. Thank you very much, and sorry for being long.
Thank you very much, Giorgio. Thank you very much. We will go through with all speakers, and then we'll go to the questions from the public. Next speaker will be David Bohmert. He's the Secretary General of the Conference of European Schools for Advanced Engineering Education and Research. He used to be the Swiss delegate to Esfri and the head of the Swiss Core Office, and he also worked at Nether, the Brussels-based office representing Dutch knowledge organizations David, your turn, 5 minutes, please.
Dear colleagues, dear friends, in these extraordinary times, I congratulate Esfri with the formidable white paper outlining its past and its future. My intervention centers around a pact. I speak from the perspective of leading research-based universities of science and technology in Europe and beyond, united within CESAER. Universities such as my members cover the entire knowledge circle and therefore use infrastructures for research, education, and innovation alike. They provide key technological outputs. They are a portal to the long tail of science, provide advanced data science and RDM services, employ upskill users, advisors, designers, developers, evaluators, and governors of research infrastructures. They educate and train researchers, technicians, and managers. They contribute to and direct innovation ecosystems, co-locating infrastructures. They derive disruptive innovations. They bridge institutional, regional, national, European, and international levels of and in infrastructures. In short, they act as owners, hosts, operators, contract partners, and funders of infrastructures. If research infrastructures are the backbone, that is, the carrosserie of science, universities are the engines and wheels of scientific and technological excellence, talents, and innovation of infrastructures. Our members in our work plan from 2020 to 2021 have committed to contribute to ecological, economic, and social sustainability, to more Europe in research, and to strengthen the era and research infrastructure therein. They cherish Pillar 1, excellent science in the European framework programs for research and innovation, including research infrastructures. They explore and implement key technologies of the 21st century. They link social sciences and humanities, and science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. They promote open science with special attention to RDM, fair data, the development implementation of the EOSC, next generation metrics, and alternative assessment and rewarding of research performance. They advance knowledge transfer between academia and non-academia. They wish to promote good management operation of on-campus infrastructure. They wish to boost intersectoral mobility, including with infrastructures. They wish to reach out and to engage with society as a whole. And last and not least, they seek to forge strategic alliances with other partners, including Esfri. Dear colleagues and friends, this list reminds me very much of what is written in the Esfri white paper, and I'm sure together we can shape knowledge societies in Europe and beyond for a sustainable future. That is why my members and CESAER, we are convinced and committed to team up with Esfri and to amplify our contributions to the imminent and determining agenda at European that you see in front of you. Specifically, we would be looking forward together with Esfri to optimize partnerships in consortia under Horizon Europe, to develop a sectoral qualifications framework for staff at infrastructures, to revise the European Charter for Access to Research Infrastructure, and to optimize its application. Concluding, we are the closest allies of Esfri and its research infrastructures, and we are ready to help you making science happen and to achieve your new ambition for research infrastructures in the European research area. If you help us to get our pivotal contributions to and our roles in research infrastructures acknowledged in the future of universities in Europe and beyond, we can also become best friends. Together, we can build a more modern, resilient, and sustainable future and make a genuine contribution to humanity and Earth. We look forward to discuss and to advance together and to cooperate. Take care of yourself and your loved ones.
Thank you very much, David. I understand your presentation as an appeal to Esfri to maybe go beyond the classical partnerships they were looking at in the past years and decades, and to have a broad view on this, and thereby also maybe reaching a higher impact. Well, we're coming probably back to this in the discussion, I imagine. Next speaker is Sandrine Dixson-Declève. She is currently the co-president of the Club of Rome and is also chairing a European Commission high-level expert group, which is also working on impact and on how research can be the motor, the engine for change to sustainability. Sandrine, over to you. 5 minutes. Thank you.
Sorry, I seem to be having a difficulty actually. Did you see my slides just then or not?
I did not know.
Okay, well, it looks like it might be difficult to share my slides unless someone is, I'm trying to share the screen, but it doesn't seem to be working. Is there someone else from the team that can help me?
I do not have your slides on the computer myself.
Okay.
So if the team in the background cannot do it, and I think they cannot,
then it's okay. I can talk without slides, and I'll stick to my 5 minutes.
Well, I know that.
So I am definitely the imposter in this lovely group, not only because I seem to be the woman, which is fulfilling the quota, but also because I have not had direct links to Esfri, much to my regret, because of all the great work that you're doing. I am chair of the Club of Rome, an organization that has been very much talking about the limits to growth and the needs for systems change since the 1972, the adoption actually of its first publication, The Limits to Growth. But also, I think very importantly now, the new chair of the European Commission's DG R&I think tank on economic and societal implications of innovation and research. And I think I've been brought into this conversation from that capacity. The first slide that I had wanted to show you, which unfortunately I can't, is to demonstrate that the issues that we're confronted with today, the convergence of crises that now is also turning into the convergence, obviously, and I think now you might be able to see my slides.
We do, yes.
Super. So if you go to the next slide then, which shows actually, that's it, perfect. That shows that already in 1972, with what we would call today totally outdated data points and also models of computers, we were able to produce the exact predictions of where we are today in terms of population growth and impacts on our natural boundaries, to the point where we actually already predicted that we would be at 400 ppm CO2 in our atmosphere. And I think what you can see from this slide is that the convergence of the population growth with consumption patterns and the decrease in materials and resources, of course, due to the intensity of the way in which human populations are pushing the scarcity of our resources across the globe, and also the way in which we've entrenched into areas that have also started to create these zoonotic pandemics that we're starting to see. So the convergence of nature with people and now we will also see the impact of prosperity. The limits to growth thinking is already now instilled into the pandemics and the crises management that we must look at as we move forward. So why is research and innovation so important? We predicted this, we did the research, we understood the implications, and yet policymakers did not heed the warnings. Next slide, please. What we're seeing now with the European Commission and the incredible leadership of DG Research and Innovation is a real desire to start to look at the planetary boundaries and humanity's links with those boundaries, as well as the links to prosperity. If you look at the new departments across DG R&I, you're seeing now a focus on people, planet, and prosperity, which has very much been developed by Kate Raworth in her Donut Economics, which is very much, as you can see from this slide, looking at the current failure of meeting basic human needs to ensure dignity, challenging the need to actually live within our planetary boundaries, ensuring that no one falls behind, but also that we do not overshoot the pressure. So that balance and the tensions between people, planet, and prosperity, and how do we actually unpack those tensions? If you look at the next slide, that is exactly what we're trying to do now, both through the new Green Deal, which, by the way, the Club of Rome and myself wrote a letter directly to President von der Leyen, congratulating her on this incredible new package, which we hope will be ambitious, but indicating that it's the social and environmental implications of a grand Marshall Plan that will completely lead Europe into 21st century thinking and acting. And that the underbelly of that needs to be the way we innovate. We need to look at each of the different areas of the Green Deal from a social and an environmental perspective. And we know now, faced with COVID and faced with the recovery, that that is exactly the difficulty that we must be faced with. How do we start to look at where we direct our funding? How do we ensure that we do have research and innovation infrastructures that are flexible enough to react immediately to future crises? Because as Donella Meadows and others from the Club of Rome have been warning since the limits to growth, we never have one singular crisis. And if our economic packages are simply focusing and all of our funding into innovation and research on COVID or on SARS without thinking about building greater resilience, we will actually never make it through. Next slide, please. Which is why I'm so pleased to be chair of this new think tank that is being led under the leadership in particular of Jean-Éric Paquet, which is focusing on now in a briefing that we have actually been putting together around how do we protect people, planet, and prosperity as we move through the recovery? How do we ensure that we prepare better for the next crises? And how do we transform society, economy, and regenerate the planet? So if we look at innovation, let's not forget, and I will conclude with these remarks, that not only does Europe need to play a central role, but actually Europe is being expected to show leadership on sustainability and resilience. And if we do not do that in the way in which we decide to set up our research and innovation infrastructures, we have totally lost the plot. The other key issue is that we must remember that we are in the greatest experiment we have ever been in right now. This is a live incubator for how we can transform and mutate. We must, as we move forward and put in place the necessary frameworks to both react to COVID and prepare for the next crises, take into consideration the learnings that we have had from this crisis. If we do not take into consideration those learnings, which we have tried to do in our paper that will be published actually publicly in the next few weeks, to ensure that we promote resilience enhancing investment throughout our European research and innovation, to ensure that we actually put in place public and private partnerships, academic and non-academic knowledge transfer and innovation benefits that actually target both commercially viable, but not necessarily commercially viable, but important research and development for people, planet, and prosperity. And then most importantly, as we come out of COVID, let's map those regional risk zones better and then target our research and innovation in terms of solutions for those crisis situations that we know we may be faced with in the near future or in the further future. So I will conclude with the fact that research and innovation has taught us, has shown us where the crisis points are. The problem is that policymakers have often not heeded what research and innovation has done. But we also must remember that whatever frameworks we put in place now, we must learn from this particular crisis and not make the same mistakes of bureaucracy and red tape that will not enable funding to get to where it needs to go immediately to preserve people, planet, and prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandrine. I think what the question that you are asking to the research infrastructures, and I think that Jan and the colleagues in the Esfri, they will be delighted to have a discussion with you on that, is how do research infrastructures position themselves when it comes to these questions, meeting basic needs of society, targeting R&I to be for solutions. And I think that is probably something we can take up in the panel discussion as well. But I would like now to go to the last speaker, and I know that John actually has a time constraints, I think maybe the worst time constraints of all in the panel. John Mosley is a physicist trained both in Cambridge and Oxford. He's the only one I know who has been trained in both of those places. Maybe there are more than him, but he's the only one I know. He's the Director General of the European Spallation Source, ERIC, in Lund, in southern Sweden. Which is more than half finished now. And he was before that the CEO of the Science and Technologies Facilities Council and the Director of Particle Physics at Rotherham. John, go ahead. Hopefully it will work with your slides. Otherwise, I'll just invite you to talk. 5 minutes, please. I see the slides, great. I don't hear you though, John. Is your
right? Do you hear me now? Okay.
Brilliant. Go ahead.
Fantastic. Thank you. So my instruction was to talk about maintaining leadership in research infrastructure capabilities and hence increase the attractiveness of the European research area. I'm going to take that generally to mean the attractiveness of Europe as a place to do research. And I'm speaking not just on behalf of my own organization, the ESS, but also as chair of the ERIC Forum, which is an organization that brings together 21 organizations that are constituted as European research infrastructure consortia. That's a specific legal instrument as part of the EU treaties. And this forum covers all of the 5 areas of research in the Esfri roadmap, including social and cultural innovation. It covers a broad range of infrastructures from single-sited physical facilities such as my own to distributed data-centered facilities, which are playing a large role in climate, environment, and healthcare. The map on top right also shows the geographic coverage of the member countries of all of these ERICs. And when we talk about building the European research area, you can see that the ERIC organizations have a footprint across the whole of the European Union and the associated countries. When we talk about the European research area in terms more than simply researcher mobility, we need to emphasize the need for pillars in all countries of the EU, and I think the ERIC nodes are an interesting possibility to ensure that research remains rooted in all countries of the EU and doesn't just drift to those countries that are better able to attract researchers. The next slide summarizes the input from the ERIC Forum to the ad hoc working group on the future of the era. We talked, just as Esfri has done, about the need for sustainable funding for research infrastructures to allow continued operation, but also continued upgrades. We talked about full implementation of the ERIC regulation across member states While it is part of the EU treaties, the implementation of some of the tax exemptions, which make ERIC status attractive, is not uniform and has caused problems. And finally, we had some comments on the mission and challenge-driven approach of research in Horizon Europe, which we fully support, and we believe that European focus on challenge and missions is an important way to move to take advantage of the research capacity that has been built up in earlier framework programs. But we'd like to make sure that Horizon Europe funding remains directed towards research and innovation, and not simply to the application of existing knowledge in support of those missions and challenges. So let's make sure that Horizon Europe remains a research-oriented, research-driven instrument. We have three priorities that I'd like to describe today to maintain excellence in research infrastructures. Continuously updating and upgrading the equipment and technology. And of course, this requires both sufficient funding, but also a long-term commitment to that investment. Excellent people. I think we talked already, David made the point about training staff and the university community, who are the researchers who will take advantage of research infrastructures, and who will also take advantage of the European Open Science Cloud and the free availability to data and to services that will be part of that new way of doing science. And finally, excellent science itself, which requires continued adherence to peer-reviewed principles and to access to research infrastructures based on scientific excellence. So my final conclusion is that excellence is the answer to the challenge that we face. And I think Sandrine made this point as well. Research capacity is the key to deal with future challenges like the recent pandemic. One cannot prepare and orient applied research to deal with the unknown. And excellence is in our research infrastructures, in our universities, in our research institutes, and sufficient funding for the excellence pillar in Horizon Europe going forward are the key to maintain the research capacity to deal with future challenges and to strengthen our economies for a knowledge-driven recovery. I would also like to say something which I did not dare to write down, but which I think has been hinted at also by Sandrine, which is that the European Commission itself can set a really good example and lead in the way that we handle a knowledge-driven recovery out of this present situation, take perhaps a more visible role in the recovery than it has done during the crisis itself, because there will be many eyes watching how Horizon Europe and the Green Deal are oriented in the future. So we can set a great example and we can lead. Thank you very much.
John, fantastic. Thank you very much to all of the speakers. That was a good timekeeping. And we have actually a couple of questions. And as this Slido works in a way that people can also vote for the questions that are proposed, I'll propose that we go through the questions in the way they have been voted. And I have actually myself also one or two that we could also, if we have the time, go through. But the question that receives most votes is by a lady, Ornella de Giacomo, or de Giacomo. Sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly. She asks the question that during today, the event, we have seen several community-specific initiatives, for example, COVID-19, and she perceives this as a fragmentation and as a need for exploiting synergies more. And she's asking the question what infrastructures can do, and also the Commission can do, to avoid that fragmentation and to exploit synergies. Is there any who would like to comment on that question?
Yeah, I can. And I'm sure the others also have some thinking about that. I think that it's a very good question, and I think that's why at least DG Research and Innovation is looking at different types of research and innovation. Clearly, we have to continue to look at research infrastructures, but we also need to look at new models of innovation, deep demonstrations that are actually being put forward by think tanks or other organizations. How can we also bring in youth? How can we look at citizen assembly so that we start to actually take what's happening at the community level and some of the fundamental shifts at the community level that we've seen as reactions to COVID, and make that in itself a learning experiment. How do we translate that into maybe future ways of creating solidarity within communities, enhancing resilience within communities, looking at policy frameworks that actually are immediately applied rather than taking a lot more time and red tape and bureaucracy? So I think, at least from the experience that I'm having, both through the Club of Rome and some of the different hats that I wear, including one for the Climate Kick, that is doing very much applied research and innovation, we're starting to see a much more, I'd say, cross-fertilization of what's happening on the ground and what's happening in research facilities. But we need to enhance that even more as we come out of this crisis and ensure that it becomes much more standard process rather than just a fluke.
Thank you very much, Sandrine. So enhanced cross-fertilization. One second person from the panel, maybe, before we go to the next question? If anyone else wants to comment?
I think I can comment. Am I heard? Yes, thank you. Well, I think this COVID-19, in fact, is a good experiment, unfortunately, corresponding to a serious crisis. But it's a good experiment that shows that we need definitely an interoperable research system. And when I say interoperable research system, I mean both the infrastructure, the data producing, the research performing organizations accessible to all users, as well as the data distribution, data access system. We have seen that research infrastructures from different domains have knowledge and capabilities that become suddenly useful and applicable on a topic that is not in the original program of that infrastructure. And that is very important. And I think we are also facing two things that have already been touched during this conference. One is that limitations in mobility makes urgent to improve on the remote and intelligent interactive remote access to infrastructure, and we need to invest into that, as well as investing into fair by design sets, new data sets. And how to invest in that? Well, there is some technology investments, some applied research investment, of course, in communication, in remote participation, but also I would put an urgent need of increasing the manpower at research infrastructure, because this will be a recovery measure for European research competitiveness, because in order to do remote access, you need researchers in place where the instruments are to interact with the remote users. So the science will still come for the users with their knowledge and their ideas, but to be performed remotely, you need scientists at the infrastructures in a larger number. We don't have now enough scientists to do 24-hour shifts serving users at data producing infrastructures.
Giorgio, there is actually there's one person who asked you directly a question on interoperability. So that's why I dare to ask you, Giorgio. There is Jeanette Ritter who wonders why you were stressing interoperability so much in your presentation, because she thinks, or she considers that a couple of infrastructures, especially in the medical area, were actually precisely set up to ensure interoperability. So probably she understood, well, I'm interpreting now, but she understood your presentation as saying that this interoperability still doesn't work and needs to be improved still further, or do you see that that it is actually that infrastructures actually really contribute already well to that area?
Well, let me make a schematic answer. The users of research infrastructure apply because the research is curiosity driven. This is what guarantees the excellent science coming out from research infrastructure. But we are learning more and more that the usage of the research infrastructure should also be mission-oriented, emergency-oriented. So this is a very different, and I don't think we are already fully exploiting this second usage. And that means that if the whole system of research infrastructure becomes integrated and interoperable, questions coming not from the disciplinary domain, not for the excellent science, curiosity-driven domain, that will always be very specific, but coming from urgencies, from great challenges, could be broken down in activities, new measurements, new experiments, new observations that will produce data useful to address that great challenge. So at the moment we have two systems. One system that produces research infrastructure, produce excellent science, mostly based on curiosity of excellent researchers. Another system that is trying to make commonly available existing data in the fair data paradigm. But we will only have available data that do exist. So we will only have available data that were produced by curiosity-driven research. Now, the next step is to have the research infrastructure becoming capable of providing data coming from complex questions and not waiting for a curiosity-specific need of a user group. So this level is what I call the interoperability of the whole research system, in which research infrastructure are a key element, but they must be strengthened.
Thank you very much, Giorgio. Actually, that leads me to, I would like to ask a question to John and to Sandrine. Your presentations, they were talking about, John, you were stressing excellence is the answer. And Sandrine was saying that it is very important that basic needs of society are met, and that R&I investments also need to think of solutions that R&I needs to provide in these difficult times we are living. Now, I do not know whether that is actually a difference of opinion between you two in terms of priorities, because excellence might, of course, contribute or will contribute to meeting basic needs. But I was just wondering what your view is on this, John and Sandrine, whether there is a contrast or not.
I think, if I may start, Sandrine, I'm using excellence in the way that it is used in the pillars of Horizon Europe. To mean research which is driven bottom up by the priorities of researchers, because that is what builds the capacity in the European research system. And that's the capacity that then can be oriented by mission and challenge-based research, because this would generate the new ideas that give novel solutions that go beyond the ability of current technologies to deal with challenges like the climate and energy and zero carbon society. So I very much like the concept that has been articulated in Horizon Europe of pillars with different decision-making criteria around the funding, of maintaining a clear excellence pillar, which supports research infrastructures, but also independent researchers through the European Research Council, and where there is no higher level goal to the research than to support excellence. But that needs to be paired, and we see that in Horizon Europe with a significantly increased investment in pillars supporting mission and challenge-led approach, which take advantage of that research capacity. And that's where the coordination and initiatives to avoid fragmentation can take place, because those pillars will depend upon a broad interdisciplinary approach. For example, looking at energy We need to work from fundamental physics around better energy storage systems and energy capture systems, and maybe even CO2 capture, through all the way through engineering challenges of implementation, through to the social science that underpins the uptake and acceptability, and maybe even IT systems around individual people's willingness to behave differently. So those missions and challenges are the way to bring together a coherent set of capabilities, and those capabilities will have been put in place by the support for scientific excellence.
Thank you. Sandrine.
That was an excellent answer, John. Thank you for that. And I completely subscribe to what you've just said. And I would even say that, I mean, let's be very clear that we also have to separate research from innovation and some of the more disruptive innovation, and the need for having non-standard processes to innovate, because we see that now, all of us, as we're moving through some of these crises. Absolutely, you need to have the rigor and the excellence, in particular if we're looking at medical research or technological research, and put in place the right criteria to drive that research, including also the missions and the challenge-led approach, exactly as John has indicated. But I think maybe the only thing that I still am not seeing enough of, and that's where some of our queries are coming from ESFRI and some of the work that we've been asked to look at, is how can we look at the nexus of some of these different research points? So how can we look within the energy context, for example, at the nexus between energy, water, and land? And how do we ensure that we optimize the amount of funding that we give on more systemic approaches to not only sectoral interrelationships, but also, for example, now we're seeing the links between the corridors of rural and also urban communities. So if we look at our missions that have been focusing more on urban or soil protection, we haven't really seen a more systemic approach around food and the link with food security and urban and rural communities. So I feel that the kind of overlay that still needs to be looked at properly, which is interesting, is actually how we're linking that now to some of the new criteria that we've just developed at the European Commission level for the taxonomy, for example, for sustainable finance. What I'm doing now with some of the officials in the Commission is to see, can we use the taxonomy, which rates actual green projects and starts to eliminate what those brown projects might be, as a criteria for what good looks like in terms of where we want to go in terms of our missions, at least from a sectoral perspective. So I think there's a lot of need to look at those systems, to look at the interrelationships, and to look at the difference also with being quite rigorous in terms of the striving for excellence, but also open enough and flexible enough to ensure that we also are driving innovation and disruption.
Thank you very much, Sandrine. We are actually now at the end of the session, but neither David nor Jan have had the opportunity to say something. So I would like, if they both want, you have each of you 1 minute to give a last message, and then we will close the session. And I would like to thank all of the speakers for your great discipline. And we worked through the technical problems. There were no technical problems now anymore. So really well done to everyone. So Jan and David, you have each 1 minute, if you want.
Thank you, Johannes. Colleagues, I already indicated that this white paper is an entry to a discussion. So let me just really invite all of you to participate in the discussion. We have several instruments how to allow that to a broader public. We are open for written inputs. We will certainly utilize all the instruments we have available, including some workshops, seminars, exchange of experiences. We are even considering how to create new instruments to get the broader public engaged. So stay tuned. We are really expecting your inputs, because eventually we are starting something new, and research infrastructures are getting more attention as they really deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Fantastic invitation. David, your minute has started.
Thank you very much, Johannes. I think a question popped up in the slider was how to adjust or revise the charter, the European Charter on access to research infrastructure. And I see two main areas of improvement there. I think when it comes to the context, this charter was written in the old Europe, in a sort of an industrial competitiveness paradigm context aimed at creating jobs and boosting economic growth. I think the current times have taught us that we have to think about great transformation to tackle the great challenges that loom behind also the current pandemic, such as cultural, economic, and social recovery, climate change, but also the consequences of ultra-processed food. The Charter needs revision in terms of the global common public goods, research as such, values, ethical frameworks. I think it needs more agility and flexibility to increase the interfaces between research infrastructures and access thereto. The reference was made to increased interconnectedness also between the social sciences, humanities, and STEM. There is big data, there is the EOSC. I think this is all sort of a list where we have to work. But more importantly, I think all of us now, from the lessons we've learned, have to work to apply the Charter better. And we are very much looking forward, together with you and Esfri and the other stakeholders, to give this a try, because I think the current pandemic has shown how important it is to increase and optimize the access to research infrastructures.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all the panelists for this great panel. Thank you very much. And also to the technical team. It worked really nicely. Thank you. And looking forward to seeing you all physically soon. Thank you very much.